Dale Sky Jones. Yes, that Dale Sky Jones of Oaksterdam University, the Executive Chancellor of Oaksterdam University, the veritable Harvard of cannabis. She joins us on Cannabis Economy. I'm your host, Seth Adler. Dale takes us through what they're doing now at Oaksterdam University and how that whole thing came to be, the various players involved, and her position as the communications director on Prop 19. So great conversation. Happy to be on the Sexpot Comedy Co-op and the Cannabis Radio Network. So tell me this is true, Dale Sky Jones. Is it true we have the Dale Sky Jones?
Indeed, this is she, the real Slim Shady.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
So, well, thank you for what you've done. Let's start there.
Oh, goodness. Well, that's a slightly awkward place to start. I will try to answer with grace and simply say thank you. Yes, it's been a pleasure, truly, doing what I love.
Let's just, make sure that we set the stage here. Currently the Executive Chancellor of Oaksterdam University, famed Oaksterdam University, also had a fair amount of involvement in Prop 19 way back when. What else do we need to know?
Well, it's remarkable because in these days and times, the fact that I have been doing this since back 2007 or so makes me a grandma in this industry at this point. Indeed.
So, all right. Well, then let's go back even further and establish, your history, your timeline, if you will. Right. So we know that you're there in NorCal, but where did you begin? Where did you start? Where were you born?
Little baby Dale was born in Connecticut, actually, New Haven, Connecticut, at Yale University Hospital. I share the dubious distinction of being born at the same place as W.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he'd have you think that he's from Texas, but he was actually born at Yale University Hospital, where his dad went. So, it was a lovely small town in Connecticut, but I was raised by New Yorkers. They just happened to move to Connecticut after a time, and there I was.
There you were, a New Yorker in Connecticut, a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. Because anytime you can bring up Mark Twain, why don't you? You know what I mean?
Why not? He's actually in my top 5, so I would agree with you there.
Sure. A little Vonnegut? Do you mind a little Vonnegut?
Anytime.
Yeah. I feel like, speaking of grandmother and grandchildren, I feel like Kurt Vonnegut is somewhat of a grandson or son of Mark Twain type of thing, right?
Yeah, cut from the same cloth.
Indeed.
is how I would refer to it. Yeah. He's I thoroughly enjoyed not just the humor but the logic of Mark Twain. I think that Samuel Clemens, while definitely celebrated, is oft overlooked. And when his book came out, I was quick to get it on the Audible and listen to it while puking through my second pregnancy.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
So, and we're talking about his autobiography, right?
Indeed. Yes, the one that he would not have released until 100 years after his death.
Right. Mm-hmm. And it was released to the day, right? To
the day, yes.
Yeah.
In fact, the society that had been putting all of his works together was very excited to finally be able to release it. And while one might anticipate stinging rebukes of folks that were still alive, and that was maybe why he wanted to keep quiet. Someone looking for that would probably be sorely disappointed. I think that what might have been considered stinging of his day is passé, especially in light of today's politics and vitriol. You're really just looking at a view of our American history from someone who truly told it like he saw it.
Yeah.
And that view of history and understanding folks like Ulysses S. Grant on a personal level rather than a presidential or militaristic level it was just enjoyable to get to know the people that he got to know. And also some of the stinging rebukes, because they were often accurate and at the very least always entertaining.
But the stinging rebukes that he had really don't even hold a candle to any comments section anywhere on the internet.
No, in fact, I try to avoid them because I usually wind up curled up in the fetal position, sucking my thumb and crying after reading something about what it was I just spent my heart, soul, time, energy, and money doing. It's rather difficult, and I would sometimes welcome a throwback to the days where civility was the rule. And my grandma taught me a long time ago, if you don't have something nice to say, and I think that unfortunately it's turned into a situation where in order to feel important, you must feel heard. And if there's no one specifically listening to you intentionally on purpose, sometimes shock or awe or, some of these vitriolic comments are what grab attention and make you feel important for a few minutes. And sometimes that can also be addictive.
Yeah, indeed. Absolutely. Negativity wins the day without question.
It wins the day, but not the year, not the long term. And I think that is where we have hope, my friend. And that, I think, is why I try to stay on that positive path, because we can all fall into the trap of negativity. It's very easy to do. And especially when you're dealing with things like what we're talking about. Nobody's going to build a statue for what it is we're working on. This is largely thankless work, although I do get thanked regularly by the individuals that are impacted by some of the policy work that we do or the education that we do. Right. I can't say that part is thankless. That is quite the opposite. In fact, it's the juice that keeps me going. But the politics side, not as much. That is more just a more civilized form of warfare. Oh, sure. And, the wounds still hurt, and they are often deep. But you still have to get up and go to battle the next day. And I have been on the front lines for 6 years now. And, I never honestly expected myself to be here. I didn't see it coming. I wasn't looking for it. And in fact, I argued against it quite vehemently to try to avoid it because I knew that once I jumped in, I would be all in. And that was a bit of a frightening prospect. And while it has been overwhelming and exhausting, it's been exhilarating and exciting, and I've learned a lot. And so that little baby, born in Connecticut, who moved to Colorado, and that's actually where I learned how to speak. I was just a few months old, and Coloradans don't have an accent, it turns out, which is why I narrowly avoided the New York accent, although I can still mimic it well. And went back to Connecticut, then to Long Island for 3 years, and then back to Connecticut, because Connecticut has seemingly been my family's magnet, and then down to Florida. And I spent 10 years down in the Sunshine State before I took off to get as far away from Florida and still stay warm. I had a brief stint in San Diego. And it's kind of a funny thing, because I moved to San Diego to turn 21. I happened to turn 21 when I moved to San Diego, let me put it that way. I was a little bit wrapped up in corporate, trying to climb the corporate ladder and get to the next step, and I was a little bit too focused on work to actually enjoy turning 21 in San Diego. My bad. I was in my head turning 51, I guess. Right. I don't know. I would joke 41, but I'm 40, and so it's not so funny anymore.
Turns out that's not a joke.
Oh, no, not funny at all. Yeah. But it really, it was a flashback moment for me, because some friends, when they found out I was moving to California, showed me this, first they teased me and said, oh, you're moving to California because they're finally legalizing pot.
Right.
It's like, what? And this was, 1995, I think, that I was contemplating my move.
All right. Well, let's catch up with your storyline here. It sounds
Yeah.
like Florida was kind of formative years, right?
Yeah, indeed. That was your middle school, high school,
Right.
and a touch of college. Yes.
Okay. And then San Diego to finish college, I guess, or not.
I actually dropped out because I got a nifty job offer from a corporation to become a corporate trainer at 19.
Okay.
And took it.
All right. So should we name that corporation? Should we not?
Oh, it's fine. It was the Roadhouse Grill out of
Okay.
Florida.
And so you're training people right from the get-go. You haven't even graduated from college, and you're already training people.
Yeah, I was picked out by the owner, who happened to be in the restaurant that had just been opened. I was hired on as part of just the new store opening crew.
Right.
And I apparently did rather well and caught the eye of leadership. And then when the owner came in, he basically wound up promoting me on the spot, and I wound up going around and opening new restaurants. That is actually what caused me to leave college, was that job offer. I was offered, at 19, more money than what my mom was making as a DJ and radio and television personality. And it was just like, wow, I could, travel the state and potentially the country on a very small, tight corporate team, going around troubleshooting and laying out floor plans and hiring, and it was a dream job.
Awesome. First question, you mentioned your mother, radio and television personality. Might we know the name?
Only if you were from South Florida, most likely. Although if you are from or spent any time in that area in the last 25 years, you cannot not know her name. She was the first woman to actually have a morning drive program in a major media market. Especially back in the day, the chicks were always the sidekick.
Yeah, sure.
And so, yeah, to have her own show was a testament to how good she was. So when we moved to Florida, she left her previous career, which was no slouch. She was a neonatal intensive care unit nurse.
Wow.
So she went to nursing school with me as a baby.
Oh, and so, what I'm hearing there is, there already, sure, you are simply a newborn, but you are already kind of shown the way in terms of healing, in terms of, if we're in being a nurse, you're in the practice of healing, so to speak. So your bona fides go back all the way to there as far as healing, I would imagine.
Well, I remember sitting on the phone. My mom used to work the overnight shift as the neonatal intensive care unit nurse after going through nursing school with me tucked in, actually nursing myself. That's how she'd come in quiet in class. I remember calling, she would call. She always had the overnight shift because that made more money, and she was a single mom. And it would, I'd ask her about her preemies that night, and I would always ask her if it was a boy or a girl, because I wanted her to stick her finger in the diaper to check, because every once in a while I would get her to stick her finger in poop, which was just the highlight of my week as a 6-year-old, that I would get a ew out of her after discovering. So, watching and hearing about especially preemies. You can't get much more heart-tugging, compassionate over babies than anything else when it comes to nursing. It's a very difficult and demanding field, and she got to the top of her game as head nurse. We moved to Florida when I was 10, and she completely quit. Reinvented herself and became a radio and television personality.
Excellent. And so was she locally based? Would we nationally know the name?
If you lived or spent any time in South Florida, Sunny Quinn was the voice of South Florida for a quarter of a century. She was on the air as the first female radio personality to have her own morning drive show. And so I spent many an hour sitting on the floor of the DJ booth, pulling carts back when there were still these giant cassette tapes, and you had to stack them 10 tall in the order that they were going to go play them.
Almost like 8 tracks.
Totally like
right?
8 tracks. Yeah, only like a quarter of an inch smaller, barely. Yeah, just as classic. Yes.
Yeah.
So just pulling cards and watching her, and you fast forward to folks. These days they throw me in front of a camera and call me a natural. I don't think I was a natural. I think I was in training for years watching her. It's those mirror neurons, watching her take after take, and then I got good.
Yeah, you're comfortable because you've already been there without being there yet, type of thing.
Yeah, and it's less scary when it's happening to somebody else. So I do feel as though I channeled her sometimes when I was freaking out, because truly to jump in front of a camera is like jumping out of an airplane. I mean, most folks fear public speaking more than they fear death. So I joke to my classes that a good portion of you would rather be dead than where I'm standing right now. and then you add to that you're jumping in front of, say, Fox News cameras, and it's like, oh, just kill me now. Like, I don't even want to think about it. And so it's like jumping out of an airplane, and you really don't know how you're going to land. Will the chute open, or will you go splat? And, political splat can be rather frightening, especially when you are the accidental spokeswoman for the first statewide campaign to legalize cannabis in the country in 30 plus years.
Well, right. And so let's actually kind of find out how you got that position. Obviously you were perfectly suited for it based on, the inherent training, if you will, that you were getting from, being within that shadow of your mom, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But you're the spokesperson for Prop 19 campaign. Let's kind of dovetail that into that article that you were reading in Florida, and how we get from that point to you being the spokesperson.
So yeah, I'm about 20 years old and planning on moving to California, and a couple of my friends are joking with me that I'm only moving out there because, well, they heard that California was about to legalize marijuana. So I caught just a bunch of guff from them giving me all kinds of, stoner hippie crap. And, I finally grabbed the article and looked at it, read it. It was like, yeah, funny. You actually have to be, well, not funny, but you have to be dying of AIDS or cancer in order for it to be legal for you to actually smoke pot. So while you can joke all you want that that's why I'm moving to California, let's hope that's not what gets me legally smoking pot. And so, I'm pretty sure I probably, rolled up that newspaper and smacked someone with it, as we all had a good laugh, and
right.
Probably fired one up. But it was.
But that does kind of put it right there for us. So it's not like you're necessarily against the plant, but at that point in time, what you read about on the East Coast, what was happening in California regarding cannabis was simply ridiculous. It was outlandish, even though you were no foreigner to the plant.
Yeah, and it wasn't so much ridiculous as just foreign. It was just so far away
Indeed.
From where I could see myself being. And I'm trying to think. I was smoking pot again at that point in Florida, and I call it smoking pot because I was not medicating in the sense that I came to understand after moving to California. I was just simply smoking pot while my friends drank because I didn't like to drink. It made me throw up, quite honestly. It was just simply no fun.
Right.
And so I would smoke a bowl and they would have a beer and, we would go shoot pool or whatever. But that was still highly illegal and so far away from any reality that I could ever see myself in. That was the joke.
Well, with all due respect, Dale Sky Jones, what my point is here is that forget about you and your, kind of history in the making in this now industry. That's the point right there. There was no industry. There was no even sense that there would ever be an industry. That's the point.
It was a laughable thought. That
Yeah.
was. Indeed, you are correct, sir.
Yeah. All right, but anyway, you roll up the paper, you hit the guy, then you move to California and go on.
Well, yeah, and I had this horrible 20 going on. I used to say 41, but now that I'm 40, that's just not. It's not funny anymore.
No,
so
it
maybe
turns
I should.
out, turns out not to be a joke. After
Not at
all.
all. No.
Yeah.
So let's just say midlife crisis, and leave it at that. Maybe not put a number on it to offend any of our lovely listeners, like myself.
Right.
So I came to California to work for another TGI Fridays. I had gone into corporate training development, new store openings, troubleshooting with another restaurant that actually got me to drop out of college with a killer job offer. And I took it and learned the in and outs of opening new stores and troubleshooting existing stores. Took that knowledge to TGI Fridays, which was world renowned for their training programs, and continued to do the similar training, development, troubleshooting, and either hiring, firing, or new store openings.
Right.
And enjoyed that for a brief time in San Diego, but all my damn friends kept partying too much, and I was trying to climb the corporate ladder already. So it was it was not a good fit. I'm ashamed to say that I failed miserably at turning 21 in San Diego in a way that was at all as fun as it sounds or should have been. And requested a transfer. So I went to Vegas for a year and opened the store on the west side while I worked on the east side, and went on to Colorado, continued with TGI Fridays. But then after about a year, I'd kind of mastered the end user experience, so to speak. Done my rounds, validated myself in every position in the restaurant, loved kitchen manager, and it just kind of got to the point of needing something new, and moved into the distribution, broadline distribution, as a territory manager. And so I wound up working with everyone from jails to hospitals to casinos, full service, quick service, convenience stores, you name it. Anyone that either serves food or cleans something. And also learned about some of the corporate programs that are available for entrepreneurs and business owners. Like, for instance, coming in and helping you redevelop your menu as a restaurant, from the ingredients, the menu items themselves, how to brand them, how to do both in-store advertising, how to kind of advertise, say, dessert to someone that's already having a dinner, or a drink to someone that's having an appetizer, and also outside advertising, how to interact with your community. Understanding the plethora of different types of businesses, ancillary businesses, and the depth and breadth of products that are available to support either other products or those businesses. A good bunch of them are applicable in the cannabis industry, just not yet because of legal barriers and opportunities. But they're all still tucked back in my brain, and they often pop out when a student comes up. I find out about their personal history, and their next step becomes immediately obvious because it's still a hole yet to be filled in this industry. Right. And so we can take those best practices, not just from the industries I've worked in, but the industries that anyone has worked in, and apply them somehow to this one.
And say someone comes up to you, one of the students comes up to you and says, I want to open up a dispensary. Well, what might you say to that person?
Well, I usually ask if they want to open up a restaurant, inside a bar, inside a bank, inside a jail. And if they say yes, then we talk about it, because those are the types of things that people don't realize. And running a restaurant, and a restaurant, the type that I had was not corporate. It was actually the opposite. We did everything from scratch there, right down to the mayonnaise. And so it was the true entrepreneurial experience from top to bottom. And I understand that deeply. And a lot of folks don't realize that running a dispensary is remarkably similar to running a restaurant. Right. Except with all those other regulatory barriers and difficulties and security risks, because you're also dealing with not just business risk like every other restaurant, but you're dealing with social risk people don't heckle you for opening a restaurant unless maybe it's a Hooters. Then you're dealing with political risk.
Right. But yet nothing
risk.
Compared to this, by the way.
Right. Yeah. But it is about mitigating risk, and it's the legal, social, and political risk that supersedes and compounds the business risks that are also, incidentally, ridiculous. When you drop down the rabbit hole that I fell down all those years ago and try to do business in the cannabis industry. The regular rules do not apply.
No, they do not. And, it's good that you give us this background in that you know training, distribution and marketing and advertising and community interaction and food safety and R&D. Even you're well suited to be where you are as far as training the next generation of cannabis executives, if you will. Now we have a next generation of cannabis executives that we can talk about. But we're kind of crisscrossing your chronology here. We've got somewhat of a Quentin Tarantino timeline going, but I had asked you, remember when you rolled up the newspaper and in Florida, you moved to San Diego. Where do you pick up that newspaper article again? When does that happen?
Well, through a few years through Colorado and then Wyoming and Seattle, Washington, I wandered back down. Actually, I should say I got talked into moving to Orange County, California. And I started to work with doctors in Orange County who wanted to recommend cannabis to their medical cannabis patients. And I did have that inkling of, I remember hearing about this story when it first broke. And I fast forward months later, I started seeing someone that was part of the industry and happened to have a newspaper clipping on his wall. And across the top, it just said, "The Quiet Crusader." And I start reading about Jeff Jones, who was working on changing the laws in California for the medical necessity patients who had AIDS and were dying of cancer. And I realized, oh my gosh, this is the same article I rolled up and smacked my friend with. This is that guy. I have a crush on him. Huh. What a weird, small world.
I thought I was dating Jeff Jones. It turns out I'm dating Jeff Jones.
Yeah, well, yeah. And I didn't understand. It turns out there's a lot of Jeff Jones. And if you don't Google properly, you get all the other Jeff Joneses in the world. Now, the truth is I didn't Google him. And for whatever reason, it was about 6 months in that we had started seeing each other, that I just decided, what the hell, I'll go look him up and see what I can figure out, because I didn't quite understand who he was. I had heard something about something in a lawsuit, that he had started something and then went to the Supreme Court. So I was vaguely impressed that he had gone to the Supreme Court.
Well, sure.
But really didn't understand much beyond that. And it wasn't until I Googled him that oh no moment of, what did I just get myself into? He's talking about hunger strikes and declaring, it's just, and of course no resolution, just all these articles about the hunger strike that he declared, and nowhere could I find out what happened in any of it. So I had to fess up. At dinner one night, I just admitted that, so I Googled you, and I'm only admitting it because I really need to know what happened.
Right.
The suspense was killing me. So yeah, it was the Quiet Crusader after all, and he's phenomenal, but also frightening, because it was in that moment that I realized his capacity for troublemaking in that quiet persona was alive and well, and I kind of freaked out a little bit, wondering what I just got myself into. But
and meanwhile, Sunny, and I like to call her Sunny Quinn the Eskimo, because when Quinn the Eskimo gets here, everybody's going to jump for joy, right?
Good Lord, the mighty Quinn.
Yeah,
yes.
There you go.
Yes.
But I feel like she would approve of this young man that you were dating at the time, right?
She did, actually, and it was a bit awkward to explain the nature of who I was dating, because that could be kind of frightening to any parent, except maybe mine. I might not have mentioned that she was one of the hippies that borrowed the field for the 3-day music festival. She lived in the town of Woodstock back in '68.
Oh, no way.
Oh, way.
Oh, wait a second. We go from Woodstock to Jeff Jones in your life? That's crazy.
Yeah,
That's
apple
ridiculous.
Tree rolled back, turns out.
Oh, my
Whoops.
goodness.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I was
again,
born for this.
you know,
Who knew?
From Woodstock to Jeff Jones to Prop 19, that's ridiculous. You just admitted, though, that you were kind of starting to date in the internet age because you Googled him. And for some people listening, it is hard to imagine that there was not Google once upon a time.
Yeah, brother, I just Googled myself for the first time like 8 months ago.
Oh, don't do that.
So there's, I had a mental block on that for a long time. Yeah, I felt like I was cheating somehow by Googling. I don't know.
So how far before 2010 did you guys start working on Prop 19?
Well, I first met this ragtag crew in 2007. When I first moved to Orange County to work with doctors, I immediately set to work on doing my homework, trying to figure out what are the laws, what do I need to do to protect my doctors, how do I protect my patients, what's next. And I immediately discovered that what's next is a ginormous black hole of nothingness. There is no information, and no one will tell you what to do next. The doctor is only allowed to tell you that you can perhaps utilize cannabis in a medically beneficial way. They are not allowed to tell you how much, what kind, or where to find it. And so the patients, especially back then, you didn't have all these dispensaries available or 1-800 deliver it to me anywhere. Safe access was difficult. And I started looking for who could educate, because we weren't allowed to. We could only educate so much legally without it becoming aiding and abetting a felony or collusion. And the only folks that were out there educating, turns out, was the Patient ID Center. And it was the Patient ID Center that was the new iteration of the OCBC, the Oakland Cannabis Buyers Cooperative, that went to the Supreme Court for the right to dispense medical necessity cannabis. And when they lost and the Fed said no, they moved to identification cards, helping patients find safe access, and teaching patients how to grow their own. And so it was actually just looking people up, found Dale Geringer, and I thought, what's he doing with a girl's name? So for anyone out there that has been born and named with the opposite sex name, you know what I'm talking about. It was a challenge at best. For 20 years, I hated my mother for that. Now I appreciate it, but back in the day, not so much.
Right.
And so I just thought it'd be fun to call up the other Dale. And over the years, as we have become fast friends, we've had a couple of hilarious, who's on first moments, because we're a little possessive of our name. We don't tend to share it very often.
Right.
And so he would call and say Dale, and I'd say, this is she. And he'd say something else, and I'd say, no, you have Dale. This is she. I'm a female. You got her. And he was trying to explain to me that he was Dale. And vice versa. I've done it to him, too. So now he's male Dale, and I'm female Dale on any conversation. It's extraordinarily helpful in email threads with lots of people, because then I don't get blamed for what he just said.
Right.
But it's extraordinarily hilarious when we are in a large crowd of people and he stands up in person and introduces himself. Hi, I'm Male Dale.
Well, sure.
It's awesome. So he told me about this Jeff Jones cat.
Yeah.
Who had just opened an office in Los Angeles. And since he was closer than Dale Geringer up in Oakland, I should give him a call. And Seth, not 3 months ago, I was cleaning out my office and found these 5x7 note cards. And the first note card I started reading because it had Dale's name at the top. And it had all these notes about the upcoming Normal Conference in Los Angeles that November. And the name Jeff Jones and Patient ID Center. And I flip to the second card, and it's the notes that I took from my first conversation with my husband.
Oh my goodness.
Pretty neat.
I mean, come on.
I know. So I dorked out. I totally enjoyed that moment. And,
so there's, Jeff, and there's Dale, and obviously, another prominent person as far as OCBC back in the day is concerned is Richard Lee. At what point did you cross paths with him?
Well, I was the fly on the wall as Richard and Jeff were talking about Oaksterdam as a school.
Right.
Oaksterdam was a term that was coined by Jeff's CFO, Jim, who has since passed from AIDS. He was actually one of the necessity patients, and who also founded BPG originally, Berkeley Patients Group, as well.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, deep history here. And so he started calling it Oaksterdam as an homage to Oakland and Amsterdam.
Right.
And it was Richard who was trying to figure out how to get people to show up to the city council meetings. They had just gone through passing Measure Z in 2004, and there were more things that they were trying to do with respect to taxing and regulating more cannabis clubs. And so it was a trade-off. Richard, he started marketing first, because he's always been into two things, marketing and real estate. He digs those two things, which has been great for Oaksterdam.
Indeed.
And it's what filled all those storefronts and helped revitalize the city. And so it started as this marketing campaign, and he figured, well, people keep asking me to teach them how to grow, so I'll offer that. But first, I'm going to teach you a little advocacy, a little legal, a little politics, maybe some history. And so by the time you walk out, you're going to be an advocate, whether you like it or not. And that was the trade-off. And it was just this one day of, come in, politics, history, legal, and then bam, here's how you grow. And they did this class with under 20 people in a broom closet off of 15th in Oaksterdam. And people kept calling. It's like, well, we already did the class. No, you don't understand. I still want the class. You didn't teach me. Do it again. And the calls just kept coming.
You don't realize, Mr. Lee, you just started a university.
Yeah, whether it was a joke to you, but everyone else is taking it seriously. And I shouldn't call it a joke, but more of almost like a marketing gimmick. He was trying to get people to just show up and be present and be involved.
Yeah.
And so he was willing to make a trade. And it was a trade that folks wanted to make again and again, but it wasn't enough. And people continued to ask for more. They need science. They need to understand extracts. Now they want to understand cooking with cannabis. And so one day, very quickly, just simply wasn't enough. And so it expanded to 2 days. And this was in November of 2007. And I'm sitting in the room with Jeff, with Richard on the phone, listening and talking and training had always been my passion. But because I was still working with the doctors, I could only volunteer, right? And so we immediately, after the first classes in Oakland, Jeff and I looked at each other and said, we can do this in LA. And Jeff did everything that he needed to do to host the classes out of and launch the OU LA campus shortly after the Oakland campus opened. And for the next 3 years, the LA campus actually matched body for body what the Oakland campus was doing as far as how many classes and courses we were holding. That went all the way through. It was mostly just people trying to figure out how to be qualified patients. Yeah. How do I grow my own medicine? And then folks started wondering, around 2009, well, how do I open my own? And entrepreneurs started coming in. And so we added the advanced classes at the end of 2008 to start teaching people the next step, the business of cannabis. And it quickly became the basic and advanced classic course. The basics are everything that you need to know to either be a patient or cater to one. And the advanced was more for folks that were either looking for a job or looking to open their own business. Added legal classes.
And that might be why you have, or we have more dispensaries in LA than there are otherwise. That you might have contributed to
I'm
that.
pretty sure we had a lot to do with that. I often wonder out there how our butterfly wings flapping have affected the rest of the world, and I often hear back when now that I get out into the world, because during Prop 19 I didn't leave California. It was remarkable, and still is. Wherever I go, wherever I am, whatever the venue, whether it's a business conference or something that's a little bit more homegrown like the Emerald Cup, a third of the room is Oaksterdam everywhere I go. Whether it's who's on the panel, to who's affecting the regulations, to who's in the room with the elected officials, it's 1/3 Oaksterdam.
Amazing.
And that is what blows my mind. That is what gives me chills and makes me realize the impact. 25,000 souls have come through and learned how to advocate for intelligent and politically viable control, taxation, legalization for patients, for adults, whatever they can get in their locality. We can help them learn to meet their community where they are and bring them to the next level. And that is the most powerful, and nothing can replace that.
Yeah.
You can ring any corporate bell, you're only enriching some company's bottom line. Realizing that we are changing the world through Oaksterdam and improving lives and helping people, that is where it's at.
Well, that's why I said thank you right off the bat. But anyway,
Indeed.
let's get to Prop 19. You kind of took us through the setup and initial growth of Oaksterdam, and born out of that, of course, was Prop 19 from the pen of Richard Lee, if you will, and I'm sure Jeff Jones as well. So how did it all happen, and give us that kind of story of the arc.
It started in 2009. Richard decided that he was going to do this, and he actually probably had inklings at the end of 2008. But he set several lawyers to penning it in 2009, and I'm pretty sure he got all the way through the 14th version before I got around to reading it, because I didn't believe him. I was right along with everybody else writing them off. I was busy. I was focused on the school. I'm trying to get to Oaksterdam to Michigan.
Yeah.
I don't have time for this.
Richard, with all due respect to Peter Tosh, it's just a song.
Yeah, it did not compute.
Yeah.
I don't really know how else to put it. It was kind of a non-thought. And I think that was what a lot of folks fell prey to, is it was so far beyond the realm of possibility that no one gave it any credence. And then when it actually happened, they were just shocked. Like, what? You didn't tell me. Actually, we did. You just didn't hear us. And there were several people that took Prop 19 very negatively and to heart, and would publicly claim, you didn't ask me.
Right.
Brother, I was in the room when we asked you. You laughed it off. We asked you to put it in writing, and you didn't have time. So don't pretend now you weren't asked. Tell the truth. You didn't care. You didn't believe. You don't remember. Like me. I didn't care or believe until I was forced to care. Then it became real.
Yeah, and that kind of points it out, even as late as 2009, even in Oakland, which has a rich cannabis culture that you're describing as we speak, to legalize it still was beyond the pale for folks that were growing.
Well, and the folks that were actually in Oaksterdam, I can remember coworkers that were on the dispensary side who were angry with us for even working on the campaign, saying, what the hell do you think you're doing? We've got it good and you're fucking it up.
That's it.
You're ruining this for us.
Right.
And these were people that worked in Oaksterdam.
Yeah.
And I try to remind folks, and I hope I can drop the F-bomb on your show.
Yeah, sure. Well,
I
already have. Yeah.
Better to beg forgiveness.
Indeed.
I remind people, you got it good because you're a white guy in Berkeley. What about the black kid in Compton? and we just have to step outside the Oaksterdam lines to realize that the rest of the world does not have it as good as us, but we can help the rest of the world get it this good. We can have the cops focused on violent crime instead of what you've got in your pocket. And it's starting to be realized across, well, Colorado specifically. We can talk numbers about what's happened in Colorado, but it was the Prop 19 effort that even to this day has reduced, especially youth incarceration, more than any other ballot measure, win or lose, in any other state. Yeah. We have reduced youth incarceration by 87% in California. No other state, Colorado or Washington, can boast that. And it's because of the political reforms that putting that beast on the ballot forced our government into. The October surprise was introduced to kill Prop 19 just before we went to the ballot. Governor Schwarzenegger signed in a decriminalization bill that had been vetoed by him 4 times previously. It had passed both houses and he vetoed it. And it wasn't until Prop 19 came along that he signed it so that he could go on the air and say, hey, California, you don't need to legalize, we just decriminalized. Don't bother. And that was within 36 hours of the DEA heads, 9 former DEA heads coming out, promising hellfire and damnation upon the souls of California if we legalized, also threatening all of our federal contracts, jobs, and economy to boot. So it was that 1-2 punch that was rather difficult to get around. But in the meantime, we had multiple cities and counties pass control measures that allowed and taxed cannabis, and that decriminalization bill. But most importantly, for as amateur as our campaign was, I've joked several times that I was the accidental spokeswoman because I spent the entire campaign looking for the real spokesperson and never quite found her.
Right.
And our amazing political consultants just at a certain point told me, until you screw this up, it's you.
It's got to be you. Yeah.
We're not finding, there is no one better. And it was because of the students that had been grilling me and quizzing me and questioning and trying to understand for all of those years, teaching science and politics and history and facilitating these classes and courses, had amazingly trained me for Fox News and CNN and MSNBC and the LA Times, because I was able to, spitfire, encapsulate short, quick answers that lent knowledge to their question and move on and stick to my talking points. So.
Yeah, and there are many reasons, and we're going through them now, why Prop 19 didn't quite make it, but it certainly is not a failure based on what you're saying right now, did come out of it. But if the DEA and the folks at Oaksterdam are on the same page and that we're not, we don't necessarily like Prop 19, you still needed an October surprise to kill it, meaning you were close enough.
We scared the hell out of them because we got so close.
Yeah.
Folks were expecting us to come in around 30%, and thank you for getting me back to my point. For as unexperienced, perhaps, as our team was, we didn't make any mistakes. There were no major errors. We ran a tight campaign that got a lot more attention. It was the campaign heard around the world in 2010. Mm-hmm. We were on the lips of every civilized country in the world, every state in the nation, every major news channel, every newspaper sent someone to come talk to us about this crazy thing that we were about to do. Yeah. And what I would point out, the success of Prop 19, is we became the blueprint for success. We built the coalition that had never been built before by bringing in the unions, the NAACP, Latino voters leagues, officers associations, retired law enforcement officers, as well as the current Latino and Black officers associations. We brought in faith leaders from across the spectrum. We brought in moms. It was an unprecedented coalition that didn't agree on much, but it agreed on one thing, that prohibition had failed. And it was that broad spectrum coalition that went on to win in Colorado, in Washington, and then eventually in Oregon, D.C., Alaska, and props to Guam. They legalized at the same time. Nobody gives them credit. Go Guam. Whoop,
Right.
whoop.
Yes, they did. That's exactly right. That might have to do with population numbers, but I digress. So
Go Guam.
So exactly. So again, we have yet another reason for me to have thanked you at the onset of this talk, Dale Sky Jones.
I think I see where you were going with that,
Yeah.
Mr. Hadler.
Yeah. So okay, great. We've got it. We've got what you're doing with Oaksterdam now. We've got how Oaksterdam came to be. We've got the Prop 19 thing. Now there's going to be an online component for Oaksterdam as well, correct?
Yes, we will be teaching our first courses online. We've realized folks, especially here in California, are very concerned with what just got passed, the MMRSA, to regulate medical cannabis. There's a lot of rumor and conjecture flying around. So we decided to go ahead and do a soft launch by introducing classes about the MMRSA. Obviously, this is not just for Californians, because there are an awful lot of entrepreneurs in the rest of the country that have their eyes on what California is about to do. And so this class explains what's happened and the rules that have yet to be promulgated. So we have a series of classes planned as rules are promulgated about this new law. And I'm also excited to say that we are in agreement now with Kyle Cushman to launch education around his veganics line.
Excellent.
So there are so many different directions that we are suddenly able to go. This particular plan of going online has been my business plan since 2010. I was a bit distracted with the statewide campaign that I didn't see coming and consumed my life. At the same time, in 2010, Jeff and I got married and had our first son, Jackson. And so Jackson Wolf Jones was born about a month after the campaign ended. Everything from our wedding through the birth of our child was a rather public undertaking for two very private people. It was, awkward. And we turned our wedding into a campaign fundraiser. It was... It was the best way I could think to extort friends and family into donating to legalize cannabis.
Sure. Yeah.
Don't give me a toaster. Give me the equivalent to a toaster and donate it right here to the campaign. Like aunts and mom and all kinds of folks. We got Bill Maher to donate as a wedding present. So
awesome.
there was a lot of folks that came out and stepped up just because we, trick them into it. Whatever it takes.
Whatever you got to do. That's it.
And since then, Jeff and I have had our second son, Jesse. So we have our homage to the other civil rights leader, Jesse Jackson, between the two boys. And it's been fascinating to realize, as I found Oaksterdam, and thought, wow, I might have found a place for me, something that I love doing, something that I am now in many ways become. Oaksterdam is a part of me. But I was never expecting to find family. And that was the most precious gift of all.
Yeah.
Both the family that Jeff and I grew ourselves the hard way, but also the friends, the folks that come into Oaksterdam. Oftentimes people find not just their next business partner, but oftentimes their life partner. I just mentioned Kyle Cushman. It was bringing him to teach in Michigan back in, it was, I can't remember now, I think 2011, where he met one of my students who he just married 2 weeks ago.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, don't dip your pen in company ink. I'm not condoning that behavior, people.
But if it works,
but
it
what
works.
a beautiful love story, and
Right.
It's slightly different when you're adult learners. The whole college student,
Indeed.
It didn't apply, but it was a beautiful thing. And I hear this all the time, that folks come back and I realize that they found the person that they're working with or the person that they're living with here at Oaksterdam, and it was finding those like-minded people that have like-minded spirits, that whole cut from the same cloth.
Yeah.
And most folks were ridiculed or at the very least embarrassed. They had to keep secret their private love of cannabis or their talent. There's a lot of folks that come to us that graduated from MIT, and I get these photos of them moving, their MIT or some 8-year education program over so that they can put their Oaksterdam University certificate because they're so proud of that. And I jokingly call them rocket surgeons or brain scientists. These just amazing minds in our country. Some of our alumni have worked for NASA. Our collared priests, our retired law enforcement officers, our retired elected officials, doctors, nurses, and also a grip of them never graduated high school because it was the fact that they loved marijuana that made them the loser, the outcast, the joke of the community, of the family, of their friends. And now, finally, the thing that they were good at. There is such a thing as a connoisseur. Yeah. And growing is now rewarded instead of illegal. And so those folks, in some cases, this is the only certificate. They don't have even a high school diploma on their wall.
Right.
This is the first certificate of achievement that validates who they are, where they've been, where they come from, and where they're about to go with their lives. And now they are celebrated instead of scorned.
Amazing.
And those are just so touching.
Yeah. You guys are doing amazing stuff. You really are. And I want to finish with 3 final questions, okay? So I'll lay them out for you, and then I'll ask you them one by one. Here are the 3 final questions. First question is, what has most surprised you in cannabis? Second question is, what has most surprised you in life? Third question is, on Dale Sky Jones' soundtrack of her life, what is one track, what is one song that must be there? Some folks have the toughest time with that one. But as far as cannabis, what has most surprised you in cannabis?
And this is an open-ended question where I could go anywhere with it, with the plant or the people or any of that, huh?
Indeed. That is why we end it with just the word cannabis. Exactly.
I'm going to have my hardest time with this. I'm sorry. I should be quicker on the gun. Oh, hell's bells.
Well, you've got half of a lifetime invested in cannabis, so it makes sense that this might take some time to figure out.
I think that what surprised me most about cannabis is the ability for the plant, through either what it does or what it represents, to change the entire mindset of individuals that come into contact with it. It is shocking, the individual stories that even folks that come to us with a pure economic interest, which, I don't judge. There's lots of folks that are just trying to make a living. And isn't that the American dream? So go for it, as long as you're doing it well. And how about a compassion program while you're at it? There are right ways to do it. And having those folks come back and share with me the compassion programs that they instituted because of the 15 minutes in those 4 days that I put a patient in front of them to tell them the story of why you should care, and then realizing that they turned around and impacted tens of thousands of people because of the 15 minutes that we forced on them that they didn't know they were going to get and didn't even realize they wanted, but that probably choked them up and haunted their dreams and kept them up at night at 3 a.m. and changed the way they do business. That people that are mouth-frothing prohibitionists, that once they see a seizing child, smile. It changes lives. And so that is I don't know very many things that can have such an effect on people in so many ways, in so many walks of life, in ways that can both save and destroy. Because the very person that is saving a child, someone just like them, is losing their child for doing the same thing.
It's something. It's something else. And I think, you know, based on what you just shared, I'm kind of choked up here too, so I'm trying to make my way through it.
Yeah, sorry.
That I think that we've answered what has most surprised you in life as well. I don't think we need to answer that one too. I think
I would say that's a twofer.
Yeah, that's a double-barreled shotgun shot is what that just was.
Right to the heart. Yeah, let me just rip that out and show it beating to you while we're finishing our conversation.
So I guess to try to lighten it up here at the end and take us home is can you switch your mindset into a song, you know? So on your soundtrack of life, a song that has come through you that must be on your soundtrack of life.
Yes, and I'm just for the life of me trying to remember what it's called. It's right on the tip of my tongue. You know, and it's funny because I remember a friend of mine as I was leaving California, probably the same friend I smacked with a rolled up newspaper, picked a song on the jukebox for me that first popped to mind, which it was Wild World. Look out, little one. But the song that I would say most closely I think I identify with respect to how far I've come in the cannabis movement and now industry, which I'm proud to say is a term that Oaksterdam coined all those years ago. That I'm gonna throw back here. Tears for Fears, Seeds of Love.
Oh wow, sowing the seeds of love.
Go back and listen to the words.
Yeah.
And it is, I think, one that has stuck with me. I first heard it as I was entering into this industry, and I would still say it's the closest to where I feel we can go with this.
Indeed. Sowing the seeds of love, sowing the seeds. Dale Sky Jones, you have done an epic job here of sharing with us about you, about what you've done, and not only that, but really the power of cannabis as medicine. And I can't thank you enough for your time, and I always enjoy talking to you. So.
Well, you as well, Seth.
Yeah.
And I'll leave this with an ask for your listeners.
Okay.
That if you know your mama loves you, which she does.
Yep.
You need to come out. It's about all of us coming out to the people that we love, and they'll realize we're not as scary as they think. And it's not until they realize it's people that they love and that they trust that happen to be cannabis consumers that consuming cannabis is no longer such a scary demon.
Indeed. There's a reason why it polls better than any politician.
Indeed, and
Yeah.
I will point out on the way out that Prop 19 actually got more votes than any Republican on the ticket in 2010. Hallelujah.
Well, listen, yeah, I will shout with you. And if it's a Republican or a Democrat in Colorado, Republican in Alaska, that's Barack Obama, and the senators in Alaska, cannabis always gets more votes, no matter who you are.
And all we have to do is teach our elected officials, and they'll start to realize that embracing this issue is not the political third rail that they seem to think it is. We are on the right side of history.
Indeed. Happy to be there with you. Dale Sky Jones, thanks so much.
Thank you, Seth. Have a wonderful day.
And there you have Dale Sky Jones. What a great conversation. Obviously, one of the important folks in the industry. Everybody's important, but someone that's done a lot to not only to educate, but to communicate and everything in between. So really appreciated our time with Dale Sky Jones.